My name is John Mendez, and I am your host. Welcome to Walk to Wealth, where I motivate and inspire people new to the world of personal finance by letting you all in behind the scenes of someone who's still on. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Walk to Wealth podcast. If you're tuning in on YouTube or listening on any of the podcast directories, do us one tiny favor and refer us to a friend. And that's the smallest thing, but the biggest thing I can ask you, because if you find any value in this episode or any of the episodes, the best thing that you could do is share it with someone else so they can receive the value as well. Today, I have a very special guest, Dominic. For anyone that may not know you, tell us your elevator pitch. What do you do?
Yeah, so with my real estate business, I help fighter pilots grow proactive wealth, is what I call it, and minimize their taxes by passively investing in apartment communities. So that's one of the two businesses that we run. It's very niche who we help, but it's been a fun journey.
Okay, and I know you didn't mention your single seat mindset. You want to tell them about that? Very briefly. We'll go into it later, but briefly.
Yeah, we can talk about it more. But essentially, what the genesis of that was the third or fourth business that I started, and I've had businesses fail, but this one, single seat mindset, as a single seat fighter pilot. I found that a lot of goal-oriented people, they get frustrated with rigid structures and processes that don't give them any sort of outcome. So they don't feel like they're getting anywhere. And, fighter pilots like myself, we're constantly making decisions, split second decisions at over 800 miles an hour. So what I did was I created the largest online group of fighter pilots. And our goal is to help primarily people avoid failure, right? So, hey, look at what I did, don't do that, but then also to help them chart their path to success so they can have a little bit of control in that. So that's the single seat mindset business.
Yeah, and so I know you said that you had a couple business fails, a couple of them are flourishing. Where did this story all take place? Where did it begin? Tell us about your walk to wealth. Yeah,
so I think what started the real estate side of it, right? So as we start talking about wealth, until I had talked to you, John, I'd really not thought about it as a walk, because I like to sprint, right? I played a lot of baseball, played baseball through junior college, and I liked baseball because I could work really hard in short spurts, right? And I wasn't a big time, home run hitter, so I didn't ever really have to run all the bases. I could just run to first base really fast. But your walk to wealth, I think, would be a better way for, those that are starting out, right? That want to have some stability in their life as they get a little bit older, but also to create maybe even generational wealth. And mine started by just watching my old man buy single family homes when I was growing up. So I think he had 9 or 10 of them, and we were his little rugrats, and we'd go around and we'd change carpet and paint and hang doors and do renovations over the weekends. And so I learned a lot of the hands-on piece of that growing up, collecting rent from tenants, talking to people, signing leases, all that stuff. And I had an itch to fly. So that's where things kind of got derailed for a while. And I would say not even derailed. It's just I took a different path, which was civilian flight instruction, and then military fighter pilot. Now I'm a military instructor pilot. And then as I, fast forward many more years, I end up moving to Phoenix, Arizona, and getting picked up to be a reservist. So I don't have to move, because we had 6 moves in 10 years, and that was a lot for us. And so as we moved to Phoenix, if you don't know, which most people do know, Phoenix is a pretty rapidly growing city. And I did what my old man did when I was growing up. I bought a single family home, and we renovated it and put a tenant in it, and it worked. And so I had been reading about apartments or multifamily for many years at this point. I had a ton of notes, and I ended up selling a car that I restored. I sold some other various things. I pooled all my money together, and my first multifamily purchase was an 8-unit property. And the cool it was very uncomfortable, right? Because we were in uncharted territory. And I wanted to kind of accelerate the process, right? Because buying a property is the same if you buy 1 unit or if you buy 250 units. You follow a lot of the same steps. Now, granted, there's some tweaks here and there, but largely it's the same. So we bought an 8 unit. My wife and I did, and then the F-16 fighter jet that I fly, we call it the Viper. And so I started Viper Ventures LLC, and that was my real estate company. And 2 of my close fighter pilot buddies became my first 2 passive investors. And that's kind of where it all started, right? We are not, and the reason why I specifically said I help fighter pilots grow proactive wealth is we've had a couple other investors that I've known that are not fighter pilots, but as you probably know, John, there's people that just, they know how you talk, how you work, and how you deliver stuff. And it's just so much easier for me to work with people that are close with me. We are not registered with the SEC. So this is a very in-house, you have to have, a pre-existing relationship with me. And there's a lot of legalities that we have to follow so that we don't get in trouble, which is even just another reason why I just serve those that I know. So my friends, essentially. So that's kind of the walk. We can get into some of the more intricacies of it if you have more questions on that. But essentially, that's where I started using some of my fighter pilot mindset to build processes and structures and watch the business a certain way, to keep the train on the tracks. And that doesn't mean that I didn't have a ton of failures along the way, but that's where we kind of started.
That's an amazing story. One question before I ask you my actual questions is, in fighter pilot school, do they teach you how to do the loop-de-loops?
Yeah. So that right there is actually called a loop. It's where you, when you're starting out, you learn a bunch of different aerobatic maneuvers. At the school we teach at here, we introduce that on a flight or 2, but the students that we get have gone through quite the process to even get to the point where they're now flying a real fighter jet for the first time. So we teach the guys in, only a couple of flights how to do the takeoff and landing thing, and then they're off on their own, and we fly with them. So there's a lot of teamwork that goes into it, but we're primarily teaching them how to employ the F-16 in a wartime scenario. So to protect the U.S.
And then another quick little question is, before we get into the more serious stuff, compared to a roller coaster, how does it feel when you're doing the loops, the loops?
So a lot of times, so right here sitting in your chair, it's what we call 1G. It's basically acceleration due to gravity. So the Earth gives us what we call 1G. So just sitting here, we're 1G. It go into a turn like on a roller coaster, you're maybe pulling 2 or 3 Gs. So it's 2 or 3 times the acceleration of gravity. The easy way to think about it is if you weigh 100 pounds and you do 2 Gs, your body feels like it weighs 200 pounds. So the F-16 can pull 9 Gs. So it's incredibly taxing when you're going into a turn on a roller coaster in an F-16, but you're pulling 9 times the weight of your body. Now you are canted back a little bit, so it's not as fierce as if you were standing up, right? It's not like, it's not like I get in the squat rack and I got 1,800 pounds on me and I'm going to try to squat that, right? It's not a direct correlation, but the concept is the same. The feeling that you get going down the roller coaster, that's negative Gs. So that's like your blood going up into your head. It's like a free fall. I don't, you kind of have control over how you make that feel in the jet with the control stick. So you can make yourself float. I mean, there's been times where I've taken people up in like a civilian airplane and you just kind of push the controls forward and I'll just hold my pencil in the air and I'll let go of it. And because there's 0 Gs, essentially like we're floating, the pencil just floats in the cockpit. And people don't believe it. And I'm like, oh, go ahead and grab the pencil. And then you put you increase the aft stick pressure and then the pencil will fall, right? So
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
So, but to get back into the actual, the main part of the conversation, I just wanted to know that for curiosity's sake. Let's take it back to the single family property. What was your mindset around there? I know your old man, invested in a lot of property, so you got to witness firsthand, what it was like collecting rents and signing leases and talking to tenants and other stuff. How did you, acquire that first property? And then after that, how did you make? As you said already, just buying one is the same for the most part as buying many
Yeah.
others. But like, what made you make that leap from one? Because usually people's like one, and then maybe I got to do it.
Yeah,
Like, you
sure.
went from 1 to 8. So let's start with acquiring that first property.
Yeah.
How'd
So
that
the
take place?
first property, the kind of the idea behind that was, you know, I had my dad told me at one point, because he's been one of the executive types, so all of the CEO, COO, all that stuff, right? He's really good at operations on a large scale. And he told me one day, he's like, really the only thing, he's made some money in the stock market, but he said the real estate was essentially, like you have on your podcast, the walk to wealth, right? That was the way where it, you know, historically speaking, real estate kind of holds its value. It gives you something to tangible to put your hands on. And so that's where I kind of stopped heavily investing in stocks and kind of like started to not necessarily even like diversify my portfolio. I just wanted to look at that, right? Because I got an older guy that's been doing it many years telling me this. So I might as well try it. And so, I mean, it was as easy as contacting, you're a realtor, right? Like contacting, you know, I didn't really know where to start. So I started with my cousin that lives in Scottsdale, and he owned properties. And I was like, okay, what's the first step? He's like, hey, talk to this dude. He's like the number 3 realtor in Phoenix. And I was like, wow, that's pretty sweet. Thanks for the, you know, for the referral. So I think the idea is that I already had the mindset to do it. The second step was I was looking for a coach or a guide, which is super important. And then the third step being action, right? So I get the coach or the guide. I'm like, hey, dude, this is kind of what I'm looking for. It is a investment property, kind of outlined it there. And then we just started looking at stuff, right? We had at that point set aside some money for investing. So we had enough to put, you know, 20% down, just because we were going to buy it as an investment property. I know that there are other avenues. I think it's called house hacking, where you can buy a house, live in it, and then fix it up. And then like a year or two later, you can rent it out, and maybe move to another house, which is a very, that's a great idea when you're younger. But for me, married, 4 kids, not really super conducive to family life if you're just upending everybody, you know, every year. So we had a little bit of money set aside to put, you know, money down on the down payment. I had plenty of experience renovating stuff. So I didn't have any issues ripping up tile and painting and hiring somebody to do the plumbing. And I was kind of my little mini general contractor, and I subbed some stuff out. And then I didn't know anything about the lease stuff. So I started reading books. I was like, how do you lease a property without getting in trouble? If I'm the property manager, what disclosures, what do I need to send the tenants? How does that all work? And then I'm like, well, I don't know. So I started asking people. The guy that sold me the place just happened to have all of those forms. So he's like, dude, use these. So, you know, I went through that. I listed it on, you know, all the different websites. There's Hot Pads and Zillow, and, you know, there's so many platforms for people to look for rental properties nowadays. So we listed it, we showed it a few times, and we found a dude, and we got him to, you know, he signed the lease and moved in. And then it was just a matter of kind of outlining like, hey, dude, here's where you find your keys and your mailbox, all the intricacies of that, right? I didn't know. The point being, I didn't know all of those different steps, but those things can be learned as you're making your walk, you know, to that first purchase, right? So you don't need to know everything, which I think will prevent a lot of people from even starting, right? So that is, I think, the biggest thing that I learned was just start, and you can figure it out along the way.
2 quick questions. Like what you're mentioning right now, like the analysis paralysis, that's like the coin term for it, when you know, too much research and not enough action. But I wanted to ask you, what was your screening process like? You know, especially, were you in Scottsdale already, or were you did you already move to Phoenix when you bought the first property, or were you investing?
Yes, I was in Phoenix. So that was kind of one of the big things. For me personally, I don't own anything that I can't drive to in less than an hour. So then that's just a personality trait of mine, is I want to go put my own feet on my own property and look around. You know, I now have a pretty nice drone for more reasons than one, but my little drone, I can just start that old guy up and just fly over the property and just look at my cell phone. And that's how I tour my properties now. So, I mean, there's tons of different ways, but like you were saying, you know, I was here, boots on the ground. I knew that I didn't necessarily have to move for several years. I hadn't been hired as a reservist yet, but that definitely helped to give me some stability here.
Yeah. And so what was it like when after you interviewed the tenant? Did you get like several interviews for tenants, or like what was the kind of like the screening process? Well, I know usually the main is like income, the security and credit, but like what other things did you look for that most people kind of overlook?
Yeah. So the screening piece of it, you know, it really depends what type of asset that you buy. So, and what do they say? Real estate is very local. So, you know, you can go one block down the street and the homes and the whole vibe of the neighborhood can change. So if I actually don't manage property anymore, my property managers do that. But like you were saying, there are some things that I outlined in that listing that I was very clear about up front. Hey, you have to make, you know, 2.5 times the rent. That has to be, you have to have that money coming in each month. On a single family home, I think we usually use is 3 times the rental cost. So a little bit higher than what we,
that seems, that's pretty standard.
So like 3 times the rental income. Look at their credit history. You know, I charge, you know, if somebody's kind of toying around, if they're not willing to throw a few bucks your way up front. So what I did was I would just charge $50 for a background check or some sort of like screening thing. And if people aren't going to spend $50 to rent a property that costs, you know, several $1,000s a month, then it's like, well, dude, I don't know if you got to put your money where your mouth is. So that was kind of another hurdle.
Yeah.
And then, you know, each state, I believe each state has their own rules on how much you can actually charge for a security deposit. So I think in Arizona, it's 1.5 times the monthly rent. Don't quote me on that. Again, my property managers do all that stuff now, but I would highly recommend a security deposit of at least 1 month's rent when you are, you know, and that's what we did. It was 1 month's rent. And again, if somebody doesn't have 1 month's rent set aside as cash that they can put down to move in, and they're having trouble coming up with that money, that should be a red flag to you. Like, dude, is this guy is he kind of living paycheck to paycheck? Does he even have a job? Right? Has he lied to me? We've been lied to before. So I'm not saying that it's going to prevent all of those missteps, but it can definitely help.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people, especially because the accessibility to see a lot of these rentals, you don't need an agent because you can go on sale, you can go on apartments.com, you can go on Hotpad and all these trillion different websites. So it's like a lot of people you just are kind of like in a way like window shopping, and some of them, you know, may have to reach out to get a room. Some people may have to go to like a rooming house, some people, but it's like you have to know what your investment is and know what kind of ideal tenant you have in mind without getting into fair housing or anything like that. And
so, I mean, you can also you could use a property manager if you just don't want to deal with anything, you know, because that's a lot of busy work, right? There's a lot of forms. There's a lot of legalities that go into protecting the tenant's rights because generally they're going to be the ones that are protected there, right? So protect yourself as the landlord. You can shield yourself a little bit by having a professional property manager that is under a brokerage or something along those lines. You won't make as much cash, but it'll free up some time for maybe to buy a second one or a third one, right? And I think there's something called the law of scarcity, right? So what I remember, I'm now laughing because I look back at it. What I did, because it was, you know, it's a 25-minute drive one way for me to get there. And I didn't have time to go do these onesie, twosie, like schedule events. So what I did is I scheduled them all at the same time. And so if you get a bunch of people driving up to a property, it's probably kind of like maybe selling a used car, right? Like have 5 people show up to buy the same used car. And they're like, there's one car, there's 5 of us, there's one house, there's 3 of us. So I had 3 people show up to look at the place and we signed a lease the next morning. Now, granted, there was a little bit more that went into it, but I would say create a little bit of scarcity, right? In what you're offering, especially if it was nice, right? We did a full renovation. The place is really nice. And so it was kind of like, this is nice. It was well priced. It wasn't above, we pulled all the comps for the neighborhood to see what the comparable listings were showing for rent. And I'm laughing now because I'm like, wow, that's probably one of the big things. I didn't know at the time. It was more of just like, I wanted to save myself time. But now in, marketing and all that kind of stuff, it's like you could save yourself time and create scarcity and have people, chomping at the bit to give you money and move in.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing idea. It's like you hold like pretty much like a mini open house sort of kind of for the rental, and it ended up working out. Now that we got kind of the first property down, what made you shift to just going big and just getting an 8 unit? I know you had to sell a couple, of your assets that you had to get the money for it, but like even before you had to sell anything, mentally, what allowed you to like say, hey, one's not that bad, I'll just go for 8 instead of going for like maybe 2 or 3 or 4, which is usually the typical way people go about it?
The genesis of that idea started out, and I have no financial stake in saying this, it was Robert Kiyosaki's book, right? So do you know the name of the book?
Rich Dad Poor Dad, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Rich Dad Poor Dad.
So I read that book now probably about 16 years ago, right? And so when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, my dad didn't do all of the stuff, but he did a lot of the poor dad type stuff. So I call it, stepping over a dollar to pick up a dime. And it's this idea that I'll do it myself mindset. And I'm not saying, so I have a lot of that, right? So that shouldn't dissuade you from doing it. As you start doing, right? Because if you are an action taker, if you are a peak performer, a high achiever, you have to sit down and ask yourself, like, where am I feeling pain, right? And my pain came through accounting. I can do accounting. I went to college. I got a degree. I was doing it, but I hated doing it. So I hired an accountant. The second property, so multifamily, I was renovating a unit, and it was 3 days prior to Christmas. And I remember throwing a sledgehammer through the wall, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore because I'm spending too much time away from my family, right? So it's just that, but I didn't run from the pain. I hired subcontractors, and then I didn't like dealing with subcontractors. So I hired a foreman to deal with all of the subcontractors. And then the last one was, property management. I don't like busy work. So who can do that? Like there's property managers that love doing that type of work, and they're good at it. They're actually a lot better than I am at it. So the Rich Dad Poor Dad book was the seed that was planted, and it went a little bit like this. If I could sum up the whole book, it was not that I can't do that. Why not? Why not do it? Right. And through Robert Kiyosaki's books, and I'm a voracious reader. I listen to books all the time. I read all the time. I had them on my cell phone, overseas. I would be, anytime we would like go on a trip or something like that, I would just be reading real estate books like a total dork and taking notes. Right. I'm like, how am I going to do this? So by the time I took down my first rental property, I had been reading about this stuff for a number of years, and I had tons of notes. I had taken an online course to figure out how to underwrite commercial property, right? Because once you go over 5 units, you're now in a different space. You can't use residential financing on 5 units or more. So how do I talk to bankers? So I had years of reading books. So I had like the classic, you graduate from college or high school, right? I had no on-the-job training. And I'm like, well, other people have done this before, so why not me? Right? So get after it and do it.
Yeah.
But Robert Kiyosaki planted that seed of why not? And then I looked at it and go, I had made a goal, right? Because there's something powerful, and people think it's cheesy, but writing stuff down. And I would just look at my goals every single morning. And one of them was I wanted 10 units in 10 years. So I was like, back then, I was like, I'm going to be retired and I can have 10 units, whatever that looks like. Well, dude, in the first year, I had 9 units. So that's just how powerful it can be when you have intentionality and focus, and you tell yourself, well, why not? What's stopping me? Right? And you might fail. I've had a business fail before, and I turned it off, and I was like, I learned some stuff from it. I didn't fail as a person. The business did, right? And I could have done some things, but I learned from it. So that was kind of the leap
Yeah, no.
that I was like, I did all this work to buy one. Why not get 8? And then what that turned into is I could have 5 of the 8 units empty, and we would still be making all of our payments. So that was the power behind multifamily. Was it's one property. I do all this work to get this one property, but I have 8 units, and then there's some stability in, even a duplex, right? You have one tenant move out. Well, you should be making 50% of your income, and hopefully that covers a lot of your expenses.
Yeah, no, I love the way the fact that you went into that, because we went into syndications. And before I get into this, I want to touch on the rich dad poor dad thought before I lose my train of thought. There's a quote, it kind of very similar meaning to stepping over a dollar to get a dime, but it's called like don't be penny wise and pound foolish, which is like kind of the same concept of the idea. Like people are so smart, and I guess when it comes to the little things that don't really matter, like the busy work, doing the DIY, contracting, things like that. And when it comes to major money moves that'll put them in a better position to make more money, like leveraging, it's like they go about things all the wrong way. So I love that you put it stepping over a dollar to get a dime. I never heard it that way. So it's interesting how so many ways to kind of get the same message across. And then on the investing side of things, in terms of, I also liked how you mentioned that finding your pain points. A lot of people have that ego, and especially when you come from a lot of scarcity. When people come from scarcity, they like control. They like having control over everything, and it's like it's very hard for them to let go. And you were able to do that. I wanted to ask you, because you kind of brought it up, underwriting. What was it like talking to lenders and in the commercial space? How did you go find these lenders? Why did you reach out to these specific lenders over other? What was your process there?
What I did initially was I was doing a lot of, I'm an action taker. So 99 people will be figuring things out. They're stuck in this, like you said, analysis paralysis, or I call it figuring. I need more data, or I need to read a book, or I need to do some more research, or and I'm like, okay, sweet. Well, I'm going to start doing, and I'm going to be the guy that buys this thing, and I'm going to put it under contract. And when I put it under contract, I kind of put the cart before the horse, because I didn't have any commercial lenders lined up. Okay. So now I'm on a timeline. And when you put an action taker on a timeline, coming from kind of a scarcity mindset myself, is I don't want to fail. Right. And so I'm going to just grip as tight as I possibly can. And it is going to literally kill me if I fail. Right. So I'm just gripping on, and I'm calling people. I'm talking to the realtor at the time. He had some contacts. I'm talking to them. And what helped me was I literally just got on the phone. I sat down, and I was like, I am not going to stop calling people until somebody talks with me. I'm not failing. I'm not going to let this derail this, because that was really the one big pain point when I started out. And I ended up talking to a guy that referred me to a commercial brokerage, right? So the brokerage is filled with brokers and with bankers, right? So they speak the bank speak. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, realize at this point, I had gone through some significant training on how to underwrite things. So I wasn't going into this completely blind. I knew how much the property could cash flow. I knew what a cap rate was. I knew what internal rates of return were. I knew all these terms. I knew how to calculate them very quickly. I had, so this might make you laugh, I had, like a dork, underwrote 200 properties before I put my first property under contract. And I did that in a very short period of time. So I went through the course, and then any property that hit the market, I would underwrite it just to see, like a banker would. And then what that allowed me to do is, after 100, I started seeing some trends. And when a property would come on the market, so I have this in Google Maps. I just started a different email, and in Google Maps, I started mapping with pins all the different properties around Phoenix. And that allowed me to see geographically where they were, what stuff sold for, and I would keep notes on every single property that I underwrote. And that way, when a property popped up, I could see, oh, just down the street, there's the pin. Now, granted, there's software for this. There's brokerages and stuff that can give you this information through CoStar and all that stuff, but I didn't even know what that was at the time. So I'm just tracking stuff. And when this property hit, I was like, dude, that one fits and the numbers work. And I know a banker will lend on this, but I didn't know if he was going to lend to me. But I was just going to do it, right? Because I'm an action taker. So I end up running into this brokerage that talks to banks. And what I did, and what really lent some credibility, was the fact that I had W-2 income. I had money to put down. I'm a fighter pilot. That did help. That actually came up. I was like, I'm a fighter pilot and I don't like to fail. So this isn't going to just like go on your books at the bank and fall apart. And then I owned single family home real estate at that point, and I had a history of owning single family homes. So I had stuff going for me. But what it came down to was there were 3 banks willing to lend to me. 2 fell out. There was 1 left. And so I bit the bullet and got dressed up in a suit and drove down to the bank. And I walked in and I was like, this is new space for me. I don't even know if this is acceptable to do to bankers, but I'm here. I'm in a suit. I'm an American fighter pilot. I don't like to lose. I want to buy this property. You're going to make a lot of money on this with this loan, and I won't fail. I'll make it happen. And here's why. And I walked out with a letter that said I was getting a loan for that property. So I think the idea being the mindset is important, right? Having some coaches or a guide. In this case, it was a commercial lender, a brokerage firm, right? That kind of went out and said, hey, here's the banks that fit in this space. Cause some lenders are very specific who they will lend to, and how they underwrite properties. Some won't lend if you want to buy like a gas station, right? Like there's so many different types of commercial lending. So they helped me find and hone in the one bank that gave me my first note. Now, I got that first deal under my belt. The second deal we did, I had 5 banks that would give me a note just on deal number 2. On deal number 3, 20 banks. So as you start stepping forward, there's going to be people that start lining up to help you because you have that proven track record. But it's that third step: mindset, followed by a coach or a guide, and then action. You have to put stuff into action. And as you're taking action, don't be putting it, like, you can use social media and stuff like that, but stay focused and where your goal line is, and keep running there, and people will see that. Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah, definitely. And in all cases. And I wanted to talk to you a bit about just based off our conversation. One thing, a general theme I kept seeing is that you're an action taker and you get things done, but also you do a lot of research. Like you mentioned a couple minutes ago that you were reading for years before you actually got into investing. You underwrote 200 properties before you actually put an offer on your first one. How were you not, how did you not get stuck in the analysis part? Because, you were doing a lot of it.
I gave myself a deadline. I said, once I do this, I will then do this. And so my goal was, somebody said, you'll start to see a banker, like after you underwrite 100 properties, you'll start to see trends that you can leverage. And so I started underwriting properties, and like after a couple weeks of dorking around in like Excel, and so I really like Excel, so I can see numbers, and like I'm an Excel nerd, so I can very easily program in like, okay, I want to see this, and like it spits out a number. But after 100, I was like, oh wow, that's true. So let me do 200, and it didn't take me very long to do it. It sounds like a lot, but if you have a plan, do 5 a day. You'll do 25 a week. You got 100 under your belt in a month. In 2 months, you've already did your 200 under, you know what I'm saying? So like have a structured plan to go, at this point, I then take the next step. Write it down. If you don't, there's something powerful about writing it down. It's why do we get people to sign contracts with their signature, with a pen? Because there's something about talk is cheap, right? Oh, I'm going to become a billionaire, right? Okay. So write it down and do it. Stop telling me about it and show me. Right. But in regards to the analysis paralysis, I call it, you kind of get in this hamster wheel of just like, well, I'm still looking and I'm still figuring. And it's like, dude, give yourself a date. Say on August 1st, I'm going to be done figuring and I'm going to be putting my plan into action.
Yeah, no,
how you should go about everything, because I feel like if you don't attach a date to the end of it, you give yourself the the leeway to always find a way out or bring an excuse or find something that gets in the way. And that writing it down, it's like the highest form of accountability, because what you did is took it from out here and put it out into the real world. And now because it's out there, and now you have to almost, and because like same thing with marriages, yeah, it's a special ceremony, but why is it so, it's such a big thing when people get divorces, is because you made that commitment in front of, the deacon or pastor or whatever, and all the people, friends, family, colleagues, coworkers that were there. It's like that, having, all the other people around you has that accountability, and without the accountability, you'll just never get things done. You're just kind of we're like, I don't want to today. Maybe that deal isn't the deal for me, or maybe and something always pops up. I wanted to ask you too, really quickly, because I know. So now you got the first property down. You just jumped up, got your 8 unit, and you had a background in as a fighter pilot. How did the things you learned there kind of help you throughout this journey in terms of your real estate investing stuff? How did that help out? How did it play out in the real world, and not just
I'll throw this out there. There are extremely talented fighter pilots. I'm not one of them. I'm a hard worker. So I'm the guy, I'm the scrapper that, I make the second string, and then I work so freaking hard, it about kills me, I finally get a spot on the varsity team. Or, what I'm saying? So like, I am willing to literally outwork anybody to make sure, and I'm kind of quiet with it. So I do write it down. I would say, you said the highest form of accountability is putting on paper. If you want to double down on that, have a close friend, have a mentor or a guide to go, dude, I'm doing this. Hold me accountable to this. And you don't have to blast your whole freaking plan and dreams out on Facebook, because you're setting yourself up for failure because a bunch of people are going to be naysayers, and they're going to be jealous. Yeah. They're going to be stuck in victimhood. There will be villains out there that make you feel like garbage. Right. So, have a guide. You're your own hero, right? And have that guide your hero plan on the right path. In regards to the fighter pilot stuff, I've led multinational combat sorties with all sorts of different countries. I've been a mission commander for, over 100 fighter jets and other assets on the ground. So, like I said before, my skills, my being able to talk to people, read a room, have confidence. I think it was Vince Lombardi that said confidence is contagious. So is lack of confidence. So not a fake confidence, but one that is, that you are a proven action taker, right? And you can learn all of that stuff, right? I was very introverted when I was a little kid in certain situations around certain people and that kind of stuff. But that's contextual, meaning the situation that you're in now, why don't you be the leader in that? Why don't you take charge? And why don't you just tell yourself that you're going to take charge, do your best. If you fail, you'll learn from it, right? So as a fighter pilot, we read checklists. Being a fighter pilot takes a lot of work, right, to even get to that. So the study habits are already there. We're fairly analytical with how we deal with like complex tactical problems. I know a lot about the jet and how it's designed, and the bombs and the missiles and all that stuff. So we're used to looking into all of those little details. We're used to, as a pilot, you're an officer. So we're always in leadership positions. We're always out front leading, and we're always dealing with people because it's all about teamwork. Even though, single seat mindset could make people think, oh, you're an individualistic, selfish person. It couldn't be further from that. Single seat mindset is that it's a mindset that you know that you're going to win. It's a winning mindset, but you're willing to work with everybody, because the best way that we employ fighter jets is through a team. So I would say that is one of the big lessons learned from being a fighter pilot, is not only the leadership and the checklist and the technicality of it, and just being thrust into situations that are massively uncomfortable that you get better at and you grow through, and being uncomfortable, like getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So learn a lot of those things already. And then I can leverage those traits. I can leverage those lessons, those invaluable life lessons of massive failure. Because in the jet, as a fighter pilot, I have failed miserably so many times. Not so much anymore, but that comes through like old man strength and experience. And you learn, hopefully you're not making the same mistakes over and over. So that's kind of how we've leveraged that. And then the last piece of it is very simple, and you can use this in any walk of life, whether you're an athlete, you're an accountant, you're a doctor, aviator, whatever, right? In business, if you plan, execute, debrief. So make your plan, right? Set a deadline to that plan, execute the plan. And then most importantly, take notes, ask for feedback, be humble when you fail, and debrief your entire plan. Debrief how, that is what makes the American fighter pilot so great, is that the debrief. It's painful, but that's where you learn. So plan, execute, debrief.
Yeah, and that self-reflection is a key part in, you know, every walk of life. I want to touch on too, just kind of another thing I noticed is that you mentioned earlier when you were doing the renovations and the accounting, you got people around you, and you just mentioned with fighter pilots, best way to find success is to have a group of fighter pilots, and you know, that team aspect of thing. You know, how important was your team both in, you know, your fighter pilots, you know, back when you were still doing that very actively, and your real estate investing, how important was it getting a solid team around you?
So I would say that it doesn't matter how, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor, if you've, you know, run a business and you're already a multimillionaire, maybe you're even a billionaire, there's always going to be people around you that will plant the seeds of doubt, whether they're doing that maliciously or they're doing it just because they've been living in victimhood their whole life. I don't know. So I think the point being, as a fighter pilot, having the tight-knit group of dudes around you that, in my case, are always better than me. There are fighter pilots that are just literally always better than me, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, it helps you grow because it makes me uncomfortable, and I got to make myself better. So that was good about that team. Where it got a little bit weird was when Slice, that's my fighter pilot call sign, like Slice is now buying apartments. And that's super weird because fighter pilots fly airplanes and we fly jets and we do that. And then if you retire, usually you go fly for the airlines, right? All great career fields, but I was taking a pretty big offshoot. There are no fighter pilots that I knew at the time that were investing in apartments and doing this stuff. Now, granted, as I started doing it, I started meeting some, but they're pretty rare. So with that, there were people like, "Oh, dude, are you sure? Like, you know, I don't want you to, and well, you know, you might a little," and all of this like negative self-talk. And it's like, okay, neat guy. Like, thanks for the unsolicited advice. You don't know what I'm doing. I'm humble enough, if you had been in that space, if you were saying, and you owned apartments, to be giving me unsolicited advice, but you're talking down at me, and okay, nice. Thanks for the feedback. And then I just go on with my plan. I have written it down. I'm executing it. I'm making a ton of mistakes, but I'm writing those down and I'm learning throughout the whole process. So even as a fighter pilot, I mean, I was a civilian instructor pilot, military fighter pilot for many years. And so I'm not new to investing in this kind of stuff, but even in that, I felt this subconscious vibe, even through the fighter pilots, like, dude, this guy's weird. Like, what's he doing? You know, is he going to do something stupid? He's gonna make us look bad or whatever. And you get those little things that like kind of poke at you, right? It's like giving a speech and 100 people loved you, and there's that one dude in the back that's heckling you. That's the one that you remember, and you got to go, no, I'm on my path. I got to keep going.
Yeah. That's great that you mentioned that, because like I've had experienced that as well a lot in my own personal life. So I kind of went off course as well, because I was supposed to be, you know, the first college graduate in my family. And then sophomore year, I left for real estate. And, you know, I've had the most, I guess, audacious person who tried to give me unsolicited advice was this one lady I was speaking to, and she was trying to tell me how I could go back to school. In that same breath, she was also asking me for advice on how to get into real estate. And so it's like, you're asking me for advice, but then you're also telling me to go back to school. And it's like, you got to pick a narrative, because it's like, you want to get into real estate. You already had your family. Your kids are grown. You're almost like, you're a little over 50. It's like, so it took you, since, you graduated, 30, 35 plus years to finally pursue your passion. And you're going to tell me to go back in school when I already found mine. It's like, a lot of people will tell you, especially when you're going that untraditional route, like what you should and shouldn't be doing. And it's like, I never been the type of person to be rude, because I can always be very direct, and not direct in like a rude way, but it's like, it's like, don't waste your breath. I'm not listening to you. You're not where I want to be in life. And it's like, not to say that these people have ill intent, because some of them, they're doing it out of genuine concern, but it's like their genuine concern comes from them not knowing the road. And so because they don't know the road, it's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that, because, security looks different to everyone. And I'd rather have a rental portfolio than a pension. Rather have a rental portfolio. I'd rather be in syndications than a 401k or a Roth. And so it's like, a lot of people, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Don't be rude, because you then might burn bridges. But then also, it's like, just let it go in one ear and out the other, especially if it was family. Like that lady I was talking to, that was literally after a church. We were eating all together, and then we just got into conversation. I was talking to her son, and she was like, "Oh, my mom wants to do real estate." So then he brought me over to his mom. We started talking, and then it went from she asking me advice to about real estate and how to become an agent, to her trying to consult me as to me finishing school. It's like, I thought you were asking me for that advice. I'm not asking you about college. You're asking me about how to get into real estate. So that's like, and I don't say that in like cocky or arrogant, or I'm 20-year-old and I know everything type of way. I just say that just like, she wasn't where I wanted to be. So it's like, her advice is advice I wasn't looking to receive. And then another point I wanted to talk about too is I've never been called cocky or arrogant or like by someone who's more confident than me or more successful than me. It's always been people, from my personal experience, it's always been people that have limiting beliefs, have that scarcity mindset, are in poverty or living paycheck to paycheck. I've never been called cocky or arrogant or any of that things by someone who's more successful. And there's a lot of more successful people than me, because I'm still in literally the very beginning of my journey. It's like, but any of these high level entrepreneurs, very successful people, they don't see like, oh, this young kid thinks he has big dreams and whatever. This is like, oh, this young kid has big dreams, and they feel fueled because they see a fire in me. Where other people who are kind of like in similar shoes as to where I'm at, or maybe going through a little bit of a worse situation, they'll see what I say and how I present and how I hold myself, and it evokes some type of negative response in their eyes. Where someone who's further along the road and doing better than I am, it evokes kind of like a positive response to them. Has that been something that you noticed, especially because you took the kind of unconventional route, at least for your fighter pilot, to investing in real estate type of thing?
Yeah, I think those are all great points. For your listeners that are tuning in to this conversation, I would say that what you just described is our culture, the American culture, puts a ton of value, a ton of marketing, and a ton of just societal pressure on going to college. All right. And it doesn't even matter if you didn't learn anything in college, as long as you went, right? It doesn't matter. Right. And so know that as you start out on it, know that you can have a garbage degree and graduate from college, and actually, I would say in a lot of sense, be dumber. Right? Because you now are lazy and you think your college degree is going to do something for you. It couldn't be further from the truth. So you're dealing with societal pressures that says, go to college. Colleges are built to make employees. Colleges are not built to build businesses. All right. So even if you go to Wharton, right, which I think is like the big time business school, right? I think Trump went there. I don't know the statistics, but I would be willing to bet that, and you could look this up, right, as homework. I'd be willing to bet guys that go to Wharton, probably a lot of them don't even start their own business, or maybe they do and they fail. So the point being, and this is coming from a guy. I mean, I have a bunch of different degrees, right? I have like undergrads, and I got 2 master's degrees, and like, I can write, and it did teach me something, but I knew what I was going to school for. I knew I had a path. If I was going to start a business nowadays, I would go either to a trade school, or I would seek out institutions that are teaching me exactly what I want to hear. I don't want to learn about anthropology if I'm going to be doing real estate, right? I don't want to be forced down this road to go learn this garbage that's not going to help me with my business, because I'm a man on a mission. I'm my own hero in my own story. I got some guides behind me. I need those guides to teach me how to advance the puck down the ice, right? I think it was Wayne Gretzky. Did he say that you miss all the shots you never take, or something along those lines?
You don't
right?
Yeah.
So if in my case, what helped me the most for commercial real estate was taking that just mind numbing commercial online like underwriting course. I mean, mind numbing, because it's bankers and financial people like doing the thing, right? And I just don't. It's too slow for me. It's not like, and it's not exciting, right? It's like, oh, we're gonna learn about numbers, and so, but it's very targeted and direct. So in your case, I applaud you for going against the grain of our entire culture, which says you need to do this, and that's how our culture defines success. It's garbage. Look at some of the biggest money makers, movers, right? A lot of times they fell out of college, and like Bill Gates, although I don't agree with all his political garbage, like didn't he not graduate college or something and like started his own business? And so the point being, if you know where you're going and college helps you get there, then go to college, right? If you know where you're going and college doesn't help you get there, maybe take a trade school. Maybe
get out.
There was a billboard. I don't remember if it was here in Arizona, but it was. It showed a dude, a plumber. So he got his plumber's license, right? Because they have to do some journeyman stuff, I think, right, to be a licensed plumber. So he went to a trade school. He worked for a plumber, and then he got his thing, and it was $15,000 for trade school, business owner making $80,000 a year or whatever, right? Which is very doable if you're a plumber or electrician, right? And then he started buying extra vans and trucks, and this is more than on the billboard, because I actually looked it up because it kind of intrigued me. And then it showed on the other side of the poster, college graduate, $125,000 in debt, no job, right? And so you get done with these big institutions that have gone, okay, here is your marketing class. Here is anthropology, because we want you to know where people like come from. And let's talk about the pyramids in Egypt, and all interesting stuff. But it's just a bunch of knowledge, and they don't teach you how to package it and put it into action. And I didn't come up with this. I don't know who this quote is from, but it was something along the lines of, knowledge doesn't help you as long as it's persistently and effectively applied. So what are you doing with the knowledge? You get all this knowledge as you come out of college, and then you can't even go get a job. I mean, you can't even get a job at Pep Boys or AutoZone because you don't even know how to do an interview, because you don't learn that in college. You sit there and you just mouth open, like, feed me, I'm a little bird, right? Like, write some papers that are just marginally good because you have to, and now you have this degree, right? No. So yeah. I'm kind of poo-pooing it from the stance that I have gone to college. I have a lot of degrees. They have helped me, but they were very specific. I got an undergraduate degree because you have to have that in order to be an officer and a fighter pilot. So I was like, I have to get it. And what did I get it in? I got it in aerospace, in airplanes, in my career field, right? So, if you are listening to this and you're like, where do I go? Do I fall out of college and all that stuff? Well, have a plan, right? Be able to be a driven person. Like, life's not going to be handed to you. But just realize you're going to be up against all the naysayers of the world. Like you just said, like, dude, there's going to be people that are, oh, maybe you should go do that. So you have something to, like, you'll hear this often. You have something to fall back on. And it's like, dude, what if my mindset doesn't say I'm falling back? I'm going to put a team behind me, and we're all going to push in the same direction. People that aren't pushing in the same direction, they're not on the team. So that's, yeah,
exactly.
That's my college plug, or anti-college plug.
That's a great point. The main message is like, figure out what you want to do and see if it aligns with you. If not, figure out another plan. If it does, run with it and run, and don't look back, whichever route you end up taking. Dominic, you made a ton of amazing points. Where could anyone kind of find you at, whether it's your single seat mindset stuff or your investing stuff? Where's the best way to get in contact with you for anything?
So singleseatmindset.com is the main launch pad for all of the coaching and these concepts that we're talking about and leveraging that. viperventuresllc.com is the real estate side of the stuff, side of the house. And if you're looking into getting, into syndication, that kind of stuff, I did write a book. It's called Single Seat Investor. I'm not asking you to buy the book. However, you can literally copy what I did if you want to start your own syndication business. So there are books out there on the market. Mine is 14 years of lessons. I packaged it in here because people are like, oh, I want to invest with you. And I'm like, well, read this book first. So I could hand a book out that shows I mean business. I'm not messing around. And then you can figure out on your own if this fits you. So it'll save you time.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And you know what they always say, a smart man learns from his mistakes, a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So without further ado, it's time for the final four questions. Number one is, what is the most impactful lesson that you learned in life?
So mine was from melting down mentally. I had been chasing the material trappings of the world at a full sprint. Okay, so you had mentioned going to church earlier. I was just a lukewarm, I'm a Catholic Christian, but up until about 2 years ago, I was really, I was not connected to my Christian faith. All right, so spirituality, an increase in spirituality coupled with the good institutions of the world, right? And tapping into that, man, that really helps your mindset. And that really led to a lot of acceleration on our part. So if you're not the spiritual, religious, prayerful type, that is a very big dimension of your life that is non-tangible that you need to wrap your hands around and get after that. Because man, that will stabilize your life and give you purpose and get you going in the right direction.
Definitely. A lot of those principles that I learned in the church kept me grounded. Next one, what is the most admirable trait that a person can have?
I think, so I was not good at this starting out. I'm getting better. Still got a lot of work, but just being able to admit you're wrong, ask for forgiveness, move on, learn from it. And that takes some humility. And I need a dose of that every once in a while myself. So I'm still working on it. But that has helped quite a bit in my life. And man, when you meet people like that, you're like, dude, I want to work with you.
If you wanted to change someone's life with one book, what would you recommend?
Can I selfishly tell them? So it's very selfish, and I'm going to do it anyway. So Single Seat Wisdom. This book is written by 20 individual fighter pilots. It's volume 1. We're getting ready to publish volume 2. So it's a series of how fighter pilots think with their wisdom at the end of the chapter. We realize that peak performers are busy. They don't have a whole lot of time to read. So the chapters are specifically designed to read in 10 minutes with the fighter pilot's wisdom at the end. And they're written by different fighter pilots, every single chapter. So there's just a breadth of wisdom. We're up to over 700 years of collective wisdom from fighter pilots in these 2 books alone. So Single Seat Wisdom would be the one there.
All righty. And the last and final question. What is the legacy that you're trying to leave behind in a few sentences?
Yeah, the legacy would be very specific from the, at some point we're all going to die. And I believe that there's heaven, and that's a worthwhile life goal to achieve and get after. And if you're doing things in your life that aren't going towards that, you tend to fall into these traps of getting more money, material possessions, all this kind of stuff, and you lose the sight of the end goal. So that's kind of my life goal is getting myself to heaven selfishly, but then also pulling my family behind me and seeing if I can pull other people and inspire them to do the same.
That's an amazing goal to have. An amazing goal to have. And so, without further ado, that is it for the interview. Dominic, I really want to thank you for your time. I thank you. Thank you. Definitely had a lot of great insights, especially coming from a fighter pilot. I don't think I've had at this point in time anyone that served actively on the podcast, at least that I know of. So I either need to do a more extensive background check, or I believe you may be the first one. So that's great, definitely great, talking to you, getting your insight and your perspective from your view of the world, 10, 30, 50,000 feet above, as you fighter pilots normally are flying and cruising. But and definitely a pleasure having you on, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. It's a lot of fun.
Thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode. Again, I am your host, John Mendez. You can find me at JohnMendez_realtor and at Walk to Wealth on Instagram. Please make sure to subscribe and leave a review if you're loving the podcast so far. New episodes are released every Sunday. Look forward to seeing you guys on the next episode. Take care.